Yes, well, and you didn't really introduce yourself.
Oh,
So,
I didn't?
no, I mean, Dave is the director of the Religion in the Arts and Contemporary Culture program here at Vanderbilt Divinity School. He's a musician and professor, academic, and awesome. So, yeah. So, again, thank you. Welcome. Like Dave said, we really want this evening to be fluid and to be not only a conversation about the brilliant artwork you see around you, but also the ideas that we're going to hopefully highlight through particularly the four art pieces that we are going to be discussing that we well, I picked them, but everybody agreed that that they sort of sum up
Right.
the theme of Meet the Fergusons. So the first piece that we're starting off with is the collateral damage of a two-sided story. And I want to invite Sam to talk about how he came up with the concept, what's happening here, the discovery process through this, and yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if I can move this down a little bit there. Oh, thank God. I don't deal with microphones as much.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
See if that will help us. Oops. Sorry, folks.
Sorry.
Now, hopefully, we won't have to touch them.
All right. Feel special. Everybody did all that for me. But I do appreciate both of my friends on either side inviting me to even take part in this. As an artist, a lot of times we don't have the opportunity to kind of voice our process and voice our own opinion about the work because we're usually allowing those opinions to be kind of projected through the actual paintings or the sculptures that we create. But having an opportunity to actually speak about it and not just speak about it as a one-sided story, but to have a conversation about it is something that is amazing for me to have even an opportunity to be part of it. So what I was wanting to do is to kind of give you a little bit of insight as to what started the series, and as Alicia said, that we would deal with 4 pieces from this series that kind of show us or serve as a bloodline that runs through the series. I'm still working a lot of this information with my work as of right now. So it's not, the bloodline hasn't stopped. It's an opportunity for this series of works to move me through another series and continually sort of use my work as therapy, as an opportunity to voice opinions and so on and so forth. So as we said, we're going to be starting with the collateral damage of a two-sided story. And to start off, this entire series started last year, right, with the killing of Michael Brown, and the series kind of started based upon my feelings and my understanding of my duties as a father of a young black male to sort of say something about that situation, and not to really voice my quote-unquote opinion about that situation, but to, as I said, my art that sometimes becomes therapy. It almost serves, that time in the studio almost serves as a time for me to understand what I'm going to tell my son and understand what I'm going to tell my daughter. So I use the works as kind of a jumping or a springboard into conversation, as opposed to a finite or the finishing of that conversation. So with the first piece, it actually is a portrait, a double portrait of my son. My son's name is Miles Dunson. He's a 14-year-old. He's 6 feet tall, 255 pounds for a 14-year-old. So he's a rather large. He's just a big kid. And I say kid as opposed to young man because it's more so what I see him as. So
He is a kid.
yeah, it is. He still has a lot of growing to do. I mean, mentally and probably physically too, because my wife's side of the family is a pretty large people. All right. But the idea of having to tell him that once he steps outside the door, that there are people that see that part of him and don't know him. And he's a nice kid. And he's a good son. And I'm concerned. And we've had conversations where I'm sort of talking through my fears about being in his place some 30 years ago, and then maturing and seeing that the conversations that me and my father had, I'm starting to have those conversations, and the conversations really haven't changed that much. With the conversations that my father had with me, he had to go through, actually growing up in the South, seeing killings and seeing murder, and I mean going through war, and I mean just sort of fears that he had for me. I'm starting to see those as being conversations that I have to have with my son. So I took the Michael Brown killing as a springboard to kind of get me into those conversations. And in the piece, I've actually put the piece behind me. They are inside the room, but I wanted to just make sure that we had an opportunity to have the conversation, and so your necks won't hurt by looking back and forth. But in the piece, what I did is actually took the autopsy drawings of Michael Brown and dealt with the gunshot wounds, that the placement of those gunshot wounds. And by putting those, that drawing, the autopsy drawing and the gunshot wounds behind my son, I wanted to show kind of the duality, I guess you would say, of what I see for my son and how everyone else might see him, and how everyone else might see him just happens to land right in the pathway of those gunshot wounds on Michael Brown. So it's very light in the backdrop that you can kind of see the autopsy drawing, but in those locations where it says pow, 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 those were the gunshot wounds for Michael Brown, but now they have become, through collateral damage, the same damaging gunshot wounds for my son and anyone else that looks like Michael Brown. Most people will look at it and maybe see this idea of a light version and a dark version of my son, but it was literally through choosing the palette or the choice of colors that the left-hand side is literally just painted with more life in it, with colors that are warm. I mean, the colors that I kind of see in my son, the warmth, the life, the hopes and the dreams, and so on and so forth. The fact that I feel that my wife and I have done a good enough job not to have him too fearful of too many things. So it was the life that I actually chose more so than the light. On the side, on the right side, I'm sorry. I didn't even see that happening. That's wild. Thanks, Dave. I
No,
appreciate
that's
it.
not gonna go anywhere.
All right, thank you so much. On the right side, it just more so happens to be darker just based upon the choice of colors that I've used. So the blues and greens and violets that are kind of mixed into that series of color forces that side to be a bit darker, whereas the reds and yellows that are mixed into the left-hand side force that to be a bit lighter just based upon the spectrum of colors. But I would be lying to say that I don't see that as being something that's important in the piece. One thing that happens in my studio is that I have a bit of an idea as to what I want to do, but I don't kind of strangle the painting into being. I allow the painting to sort of allow it to talk back to me as I work. So it's not a one-sided conversation with the painting. It's more so, okay, I'm going to put this here. I'm going to digest that information, see what happens, and then I'll make movements based upon what I see, as opposed to getting everything down and forcing the painting to be what it is in my mind. So this piece basically started the process of dealing with the fact that I'm a father of, I won't even say the buffer. I'm the father of Michael Brown in this situation, or in this particular piece, because I see him in my son. So it's necessary for me to paint in that mindset, because I'm going to be having those conversations, or I'm having those conversations now with my son. So it's almost like, okay, what would I say to Michael Brown before he was killed? Those are the things the fears that I'm having, and the conversations that I'm having to have with myself, so that I can prepare to have a conversation with my son about that. Yeah. And that is the sort of impetus, the springboard for this particular piece. And if you'd like, I'll continue to the other three, and if you want, we can kind of have a conversation about the whole, or would you like to have a conversation about that piece?
Let's keep moving.
Okay.
A little teary after that.
All right. The second piece is our own little slice of Purgatory, and I literally put this second right after to show that there was anger, and I'm not the most angry person. For anybody that knows me, I have a perpetual smile on my face, even if I am angry. I just happen to smile. I don't internalize too many things and come up with anger for that until I'm in front of my or in my studio. I allow myself to be as angry as I want to be in my studio. But with my works, I still have this feeling of a need for satire. In my being, in my nature, since I won't say jovial, but since I'm an upbeat person and I look at life in that fashion, I would hate to have my work seen by myself. A lot of people don't think of the artist. They think that the artist kind of speaks from the work to the audience, but the work is also speaking to me. I'm the first audience for this work, man. So when I'm looking at it, even my family will come down and we'll have conversations, but I'm the first audience for the work. So when I'm putting these things together, if I can't take it, then I'd feel like I'm doing a disservice if I put it up in front of others and I don't even feel good or comfortable about what I've put right there in front of me. So with this piece, this was, I would consider, a runoff of that anger. And that anger had to flow into at least one of these pieces in order for me to feel good about putting these works up, so that the works or the series won't be too, I don't want to be level-headed completely in all my work. I want to have something that shakes me as well. So the idea of the purgatory of this idea, or the purgatory of all of these things that are going on, serves as that area between good and bad. In my mind, I was thinking about, what does that area look like, and what does that area feel like? What does heaven and hell clashing feel like to me? So what I did is this piece was kind of off of a comment that was made about Walter Scott, another gentleman that was murdered by the police, and his parents, his mother actually said that he was shot. She was shot down like an animal, almost like shot down like a dog. And in my anger, the first thing that came to mind was, if he was a dog, he wouldn't have been shot. We have more respect for animals than we do for humans. So it was sort of like, how do I create a religious, spiritual being, I guess you would say? What does that look like for Purgatory, for this particular conversation? So the whole idea of the kind of bouncing baby Jesus on the lap of Mary just kind of spilled into my mind when I was sitting there looking at what does this look like? What does that statement look like to me? If he had been a dog, he wouldn't have been shot. So I put the baby there, and it was like, what do I didn't want it to be too clownish to have a physical, sort of dog's head on a baby and have it realistic, because I wanted to have a person that looks at it to realize that that box can come off of his head. The problem is that we've put it on his head. So the issue is not that, he's a dog, because you know he's not, but it's the idea of we've actually put this problem right on top of this baby for this particular image. And I don't particularly feel completely angry about the police in that situation. I'm completely angry about what it took for the police to shoot a man and then try to cover it up by putting the gun next to the man. And those issues are what kind of boiled and kind of created the anger inside of me. So that idea of if I'm going to make the dog kind of playful, and I'm sorry, the baby kind of playful enough to exist in this purgatory, then I'm going to make the police officer just as playful in this purgatory. Because it is the anger behind the image is the hellish part, but the good of man that I'm hoping that I see in some way, something has to come out of this as good. So that satire is what forced me to kind of put the smiling police officer. He's happy because this little baby, he doesn't have to kill the baby anymore. There's no more death in this purgatory if we just keep putting on these masks, if we keep putting the boxes on, knowing that we can't exist with those boxes and we can't exist with those smiling faces. So it's almost like we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't situation. If we don't deal with this, it's going to continue. But if we do deal with it, we're almost going to have to become something that we're really not. And the other part is the life of Eric Garner that was a part of this as well. And this is something that is actually going to move me into, was actually literally moving me into my next series of works. I took the, as you can see, the kind of the storefront there that's kind of being burned by the lava that's in the backdrop is the storefront where Eric Garner was choked and killed. So what I did is actually went on to Google Maps and just typed in the address of the location where Eric Garner was killed, and I wanted to kind of put that in this piece in order to burn that down. Just in order to start something new, some things are going to have to burn away, and sometimes it's almost like a baptism by fire. So if we kind of scorch everything, burn everything away, hopefully that will help in starting new growth. It's sort of the idea, if we kind of thinking of the idea of burning forests away, that needs that burn in order for the trees to grow again. So in order for all of these things to kind of pass away in some way, more so in my mind, I'm wanting to burn everything away. And even the image, if you look at the officer's shoe, he's going to burn in that fire as well. All right, and hopefully something will come about and be a positive from all of this. But this was the one piece where I felt like my anger should be allowed to speak, but I still want that concept of some type of a satire or playfulness with that to kind of show that duality of the good and the bad of these situations. Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about the two pieces together.
Okay.
And Yeah, so the similarity, it's super interesting that you have the targets both behind the baby Jesus and the targets on your son, in a sense. In the Collateral Damage story, the poem that comes to mind is Paul Laurence Dunbar, especially for this our own little slice of purgatory, where it starts off, we wear the mask that grins and lies. It shades our teeth and it hides our eyes, you know. And so this sense of not really being able to show your real self,
Right.
in a society that is always seeking to destroy you, right?
Yes. Yes. And it's still that play on that duality as well. I mean, even for the target. I mean, is it a target? Is it a bullseye? I mean, it's a halo. It's so many. There's so many things that it could be, and each time you kind of change that mask, even of that particular symbol, you have to change your concept of what it actually means in that situation. So it's sort of like, okay, if I put a target behind a person's head and it looks like a halo, what if it is a target? Then what am I shooting? I mean, I'm shooting straight through the head in order to get to the target. But
Well, and sometimes the halo is a target.
yes,
Right.
yes, most definitely, most definitely. I mean, talking about sort of being an artist that has no problem with dealing with spirituality and or religion in her work is sometimes a target.
Right.
Right? Because there's some questions that I'm asked just due to the fact that I have no issues at all saying that I'm a Christian. Just have no, but I'm also okay with speaking and talking about other religions and speaking because that is conversation. I mean, so if I can have conversation about these things, then it makes it easier. It's the problem comes when we don't have conversation about it. I mean, if so, this piece becomes a starter for that conversation for somebody that might have an opposing view of than mine. So it allows me to at least know that there's a foundation that we can start on. I mean, the painting becomes, okay, we're gonna start the conversation, but here's where it starts. So it makes it a little bit easier to kind of play that, and by doing that, it almost does put a mask on both of us that we've been wearing for the whole time, that we might have to take off or at least show a little bit of it in order to talk about these things. So I mean, you've been talking about the idea of masks is something that's important in the works, most definitely.
Another question I had was the peace sign. It's sort of a universal, art symbol,
Yeah.
of peace, and the idea of this bouncing baby, having peace in the midst of all this chaos, is super interesting. And I was, hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
He doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
In my head, he has that box on it, so he's in darkness. I mean, which we all are. And if what would happen if I were to walk a baby through that? I would literally cover their face. I wouldn't allow them to see it because I'd want to go through it. And this is kind of the things that come up through conversation. But if I was going to walk through that scene, and if I had my baby, especially if that is the baby that is going to clean all these things away, then I wouldn't really allow him to see. I would sort of tell him the story about the trip that I took to kind of go through this hellish, heavenish, I guess that's the best way to put it, so that we can get on the other side. And then when he's old enough to sort of say, all right, what happened back then? What really happened? Then we can have a conversation about it. But at that point in time, he would be part of a much cleaner, more beautiful space. It's just like when I talked to my father about, the Vietnam War. I never had an opportunity to go through war, but he shielded me from the hell that was in his head, so that I could function without a lot of the anger that he had. So he could have most definitely told me, and these are the things that were done to me as a child. These were the things that were done to me in war. I mean, because he's showing me and having those conversations with me now that I wouldn't have been able to take as a young child. So for the little bouncing baby there, he has a smile on his face, not just due to the box with the drawing on it, but also just by the idea of him being that peace symbol. He's hearing it. I mean, he may feel the heat, but he's not experiencing it the same way that the police officer and everything else is experiencing it.
Dave, do you have any questions?
Well, no, I don't think I want to comment about aspects of the work per se. I think there's some things I'd like to pick up on, Sam, that you've said that just sort of might open everyone's understanding to why we do these exhibitions in a divinity school context. And one of the big reasons is the hope of the possibility that the artist, whether it's a visual artist or a musical artist, film, whomever, will somehow model for our students how to be inventive and imaginative in how we engage around issues. And so when Sam gave me the name of the show and what he was planning, I was really ecstatic because I'm a big fan of Sam's work. Just sort of his if there is such a thing with Sam, his non-topical work. He put the show together, and it's at least what we in music used to call it's a topical song. It's it's a Marvin Gaye song, really. But I love Sam's work because it has a fire starter component to it, and what I mean by that is you can talk around the images in a way that gets you someplace bigger than the image itself. And as we were talking about what we would say tonight, just everything that's represented in this show, explicitly and subtly, the issues are so huge that if we started talking about those issues, it would swamp the art, and we would have the art would be sort of demoted again to its didactic place in which it has to live so many times, which means that art is good because we can use it for something else other than itself. But this work for me has a life force and a complexity and a texture that is in one sense very explicit and very telling, but on another level has a couple of X factors to it that I think are the kinds of things that I would hope would inspire you, me, and our students here who are really learning how to speak truth to the world, speak truth to power. And we live in a polarized world right now where the denominations in which we make our claims and discussions are sometimes way off in the margins, and so a lot of life is in that middle ground, and a lot of understanding is in that middle ground. So what Sam referred to as his satirical side is one of the things that I've always loved about his work. I love the idea that you call it a need for satire. I see you in your studio, sort of making yourself happy. Getting yourself off and getting a good sort of laugh out of yourself. But that's one of the things about this collection of work that I think is a standout quality of the work, is that it has a whimsy to it and a playfulness to it that is really instructive, if not in how to sort of parse the ideas of these large meta themes that are running throughout, then just in the ways that we discuss those themes in new ways, in fresh ways, in ways that sort of get us to a shared humanity in the middle there somewhere. So I love this work because I think it's a wide open door. Dominantly black themes, and you might look at the work and just see it as that, someone who came in off the street. But hearing you talk about the complexity of your work process, of your role as a father and a husband and a citizen in this world, who is, I can testify, one of the most loving folks among my new acquaintances of the last few years, that's instructive. And the artist as a model of those qualities and traits is a big thing for us and in this space. So I wanted to point to those things and just recognize those aspects of what you do so really well, Sam, and just sort of voice appreciation for that. So.
Well, honestly, the appreciation is, not one-sided at all. These works could easily be in the basement. So those partnerships that this partnership that Dave and I have had for a number of years now has, sort of really blossomed. And everything that Dave just said about me is bouncing right back. Honestly, it's somebody that I'm not in his office every day, not on the phone with him every day, but every time that we see each other, there's a true brother camaraderie that I have for this gentleman to my right. He's a very good person, and he's
I do want to talk about creative partnerships after we talk a bit more art.
Okay. Yeah, not a problem at all.
Thank you, but let's keep it rolling.
But it's necessary to have
love fests.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
And to sort of thank the people that allow you to do what you're able to do. And
well, it's integral in terms of creating or cultivating creative partnerships, in terms of appreciating the folks around you that you're able to collaborate with.
Right.
Having said that,
yep.
Let's move on to the next piece.
Okay, sure will.
I do want to highlight that, again, we are talking about the sort of whimsical, the ironic, the satirical. And I guess I mentioned this earlier, this piece, Jose Munoz's Cruising Utopia. In there, he talks a lot about pleasure and the ironic sometimes, and how there are sort of ruptures and
Right.
glimpses of the hope of something that is not yet here.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And they with this piece will be perfect to kind of talk about that concept of irony, just due to the fact that we have the power in our hands as black people to literally change the scope of, I mean, not just individuals, but change the scope of the world. I mean, I literally look at the University of Missouri, and I mean the issues that were going there. And I know this is not about that, but just the power that a group can have can sometimes get lost in the irony of not doing what we need to do. I mean, recognizing that you have power but choosing not to use it is problematic. And so this piece is kind of dealing with that sense of where does that anger go? Who do I kind of talk to about that concept that there needs to be work done to get things moving. So this is one of the smaller pieces in the work. I'm sorry, in the series that kind of dealt with that idea of, man, we had all this power. I mean, yet and still we're still asking for things. I mean, it's time to start sort of literally getting up and doing something to take some things, as opposed to just asking for them. So this whole concept of there are no apologies in the age of sacrifice is this concept of, if all of these men and women are being sacrificed, I'm using the idea of sacrifice as opposed to murder. From one side, it could be the concept of murder. The other side is sacrifice. We're looking at the fact that they've been sacrificed. If all of these men are being sacrificed, then it's time to stop apologizing for being angry about it and actually get this into moving in one direction to get something done about it. So the piece here is kind of building in that connection to some old works that I've had, where I've dealt with kind of that satire of using fuzzy and furry little, I mean, sort of stuffed animals. And I mean, if you've ever seen any of my earlier works, that furry, fuzzy feeling that you have when you see a stuffed animal is something that I've used a number of times to mask some of the kind of underlying anger that might be in a piece. So for this piece, I literally use that to serve as almost like a sacrificial garment to put over someone's head in order to show what sacrifice looks like. All right. So when you look at the image, the gentleman's actually on his knees, and I mean, something else in this that I don't talk too much about is when I'm working with my work, I have a tendency to paint people that look like me, and a lot of times people will automatically think that it is strictly about being black or quote unquote black art per se. I'm not thinking about that when I'm in my studio. That doesn't even enter my mind. Because if I were to change the look or the color, or I'll put it very matter of factly, if I were to change the palette, the choice of colors that I use, that wouldn't change the understanding of the piece in the least. But I have to understand that using that palette does say something as well.
Well, that's super interesting in terms of our earlier conversations and talking about how the artist's perspective is in and of itself not only a cultural asset for greater society, but it is this again, a sort of invitation for discovery, not only for the artist,
Yes.
but for the viewer, and sort of that exchange, that creative exchange that can happen with the viewer artistically, but also performing a viewpoint in both ways, right?
I'm glad you said performing too, because
Yeah.
it is. I mean, this is a performance. You're sitting there and you're putting symbols and images and ideas, and I mean, I would love to be a non-representational artist. I mean, I would love to do that.
Is that possible? I mean,
it is extremely difficult because I don't know, I wouldn't know the language enough. And sort of speaking of that language, knowing that these images are, it's a language, I just wouldn't understand how to create the same, not narrative, but the same story that I'm feeling in a non-representational way. So the way that I think about, putting the pieces together, the composition is about the play of space and dimension, and everything. So I'm really literally thinking about the work as a non-representational work that just happens to have, doesn't make any sense to, but a non-representational work that has representational images in it. So for this particular piece, the figure and using that lighter skin tone was intentional, to say that he's even, it's not all these dark folks, it's these light people too, that all are all encompassing in the midst of what black people are. So I put this sort of bunny-shaped cloak over this guy, and I have him on his knees. I literally chose to use an image of somebody that looks a little bit heavier, to sort of get into the idea of this could be me, the things that I need to do. And it sounds sort of clouded, but I'm going to pull it all together to make sense. Whenever I'm working in my studio, I don't like talking to others. My work is literally, I'm showing you a conversation that I had with me. The works have a tendency to speak outward to others when they're put up, but when I'm in my studio, I'm like, man, you need to go do some running. You need to eat better. You need to do all these things. So if I put a figure in a piece that might look like this, it's kind of talking to myself, because how can I tell somebody else, even though this is about sort of the idea of the men that have been sacrificed and killed by authorities and police and so on and so forth, and those ideas that would allow that to happen. I can look at this after the show and look at it like, I haven't exercised in the past.
We don't need to know.
So,
no
but
shame.
it's kind of this self-therapy. But for this image, he has no shackles on. Right? There's really no reason that he can't just take his hands off from behind his back, get up, take the thing off his head, and continue to walk. He doesn't even know the danger that he's in, kind of the playful idea that he feels like he's in the grass, he kind of feels safe. But I've torn everything else away to where that's all it is. If he does move, he's going to fall, but he doesn't even know it because he's got this thing on his head. He has hand behind his back like he's ready for the sacrifice. So for some of us, we have a tendency to mistake ourselves as martyrs when we're actually just sacrificing ourselves. So it's that concept of that idea of thinking that I'm going to get on my knees, I'm going to let you kill me, and I'm going to be a martyr. No, you're not. You really, that's already been done. You're literally just sacrificing yourself. So we have to actually get up and get together and work and become something that is greater than just, well, here's another guy that was killed today. Let's keep moving. Let's go to Arby's today. Man, somebody was in the news of another guy murdered. We'll just I got to run off to work. So it's that concept where if we have to take some action. It's something that has to happen to where we're going to have to bind together to become one. And if we bind together, people will see that and we'll start binding together a little bit more, and then as a whole we'll start becoming a little more of a family beyond those borders. That's why I was talking about the idea of the palette that I use to sort of change them from being a very dark person to a lighter person. It becomes a little bit more of a connection. We can start branching out and we start becoming more of a family, a human family, as opposed to I guess you would say individuals or independents from each other. So I've kind of played with the idea of that cloud, which is another sort of symbol that I use quite often and the flowers that are kind of dying, kind of floating away. He's becoming part of the cloud is becoming part of him. And that cloud is like this idea of not really understanding what to do, but he's kind of feeling it in his gut. I mean, something's happening. That feeling is there because that cloud is kind of moving into him. But the problem is he doesn't even know what's happening. He's closed off to it because he's ready to be slaughtered.
We should move on to the last piece for our discussion, and then we should open up to the audience. Yeah.
And this piece, everybody that has bent their ear about it, basically told them that this piece scared me more than any of the others. And this was the one that I didn't had to fight for to talk about it being in this discussion. But this was the one that I really, really wanted to be part of the discussion, because at the end of a process, any artist any person that knows an artist, or if you're an artist, you know that when the time comes that you're about to put these works up, then time is very fluid. It flows, but it can close off too. So we know we have to have a deadline. So there are times where I'll have a piece that I know that I want to be part of a show, and the way that I work, I just work. And when the show comes up, that body of work that I'm working on at that point in time becomes the show that I put up. And so it's not like last year I was saying, oh, okay, I want to have a start date and I want to have an end date and these many pieces. It's not that. It's just here's the work. Here's a kind of a peek into what I'm doing right now. And so that's pretty much what it is. But at the end, I knew that this work had to be part of it because I wanted to be part. So I had to move through it very quickly. And through moving through it, I had to put together the idea, and I didn't have a lot of movement on, like I was saying before, usually when I start my process, I allow for creativity to be part of the painting process as well. I don't figure out what I'm going to paint completely and then paint it like it's basically creating a blueprint and then here's the image after the blueprint is made. It's more so I have a little bit of an image, I'll do some sketches, and then I'll learn from the process what that painting is telling me that it needs. All right. With this one, this is the last piece, I was dealing with all of this stuff that was happening, even with the paintings and the continuous, from Michael Brown, the continuous killings, so on and so forth. And I didn't have the time to really be creative in the process of the painting. I had to, for lack of better words, paint it with no chaser. You know what I mean? It was literally, here it is. It was sort of like, there was nothing else. I couldn't really think. It was like, get this piece done. And after I finished it, I put it to the side because I had to create a couple of frames. I came back and looked at it and it scared me. I was like, man, what in the world? What is this? And the strange thing is I liked that feeling and I want to feel that more. And it's not saying that I want to feel it and I want to paint fast and get things done quickly so I can look at them and say, man, it's not like I want every painting to be like Christmas Day or something like that. And here's a surprise that when I open it up. But I want that feeling that, man, this shocked me because I felt it was done well, and I painted it, I put all the effort into painting it well, and I saw the image afterwards. I couldn't talk to it, right? So I couldn't talk to the painting like I usually do. So I was telling it what it needed to do, and then it told me what it was afterwards. And that was a strange, very strange feeling. So it's kind of connected to an earlier work, Rene Magritte, the son of, I was about to say the son of man. Well, yeah, the son of man. I'm getting completely mixed up now that I'm looking at it, still scaring me. But I took it and sort of said, for this piece, he's not the son of man, he's the son of a blank. And you have to fill in what you see for him to be. So is he the son of a beep? Or is he the son of a god? Is he the son of a woman? Is he the son of a man? So you literally have to say what you feel he is. And by doing it, you have to take the cloud off of his face in order to say who you're going to say he is. The problem with it is that the cloud is not the only thing that you see. I'm also giving you this idea of what people felt the young men in Ferguson were, no matter what they look like, no matter their name, no matter their background, no matter their upbringing, no matter what. Those gold teeth and that burnt out area in the back told you how you were supposed to think about these young men. Even if they were looting, if you want to call it looting, if they were rioting, if they were protesting, whatever words you're putting in there, then you're having to build the idea of who this person is. So I chose to use a man that's well dressed. He has the warmth of the suit, almost like red velvet almost, suit on. For me, his head was in the clouds when I was thinking about it. So he had hope. But I was looking at it sort of like, okay, he has hope, so the person beneath that cloud actually has hope because he chose to put this suit on. He chose to stand in this, sort of very regal stance. But did I put the gold teeth on him? Did you put the gold teeth on him? Are the gold teeth there when you pull the cloud away? We don't know, but it's up to the person that is having the conversation with that piece to sort of say who that person is. And the one thing about the kind of target, it's on his tie. So there is some issue about, is the target really there? Or did he choose that tie to put on to say that he's a target? So it's sort of a play on those ideas. And I tried my best in this one. I tried to make them quiet, but for some reason when I looked at it afterwards, it was like ah, it was yelling to me.
Well, in a sense, like the target, the son of a blank, it, even as you tried to make him quiet, our perception or your perception is screaming.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it speaks to the image that other people paint of you that
Right.
is really inescapable. How other folks interpret you is still a moving target, no matter how much hope you have, no matter how well dressed you are or articulate you are or soft spoken or whatever, people will still perceive you as a son of or a daughter of a blank, whatever that is.
That's why I love these conversations, because like I said, this is not a finite idea. It's not. It's like, okay, I'm putting these up to really talk to people about them. So I didn't even think about that idea of a moving target. It's like, okay, he has the tie on, it's going with him wherever he goes.
Wherever he goes.
So I didn't even think about that concept. So that now becomes part of the concept.
So let's talk about that
Would be
together. These pieces. These pieces. What speaks to you? What do you want to ask Sam? We've been talking about obviously the artist's point of view as really invaluable to how we, make our cultural or invest in cultural assets in a sense, but also the ideas not only as art, not only as a dialectic or to these larger issues, but the richness that these of course this is about humanity because Black people are human, right? So, right, of course this speaks to a larger human issue because Black folks are human and you are a human being. So anyway, so yeah, talk back. What do y'all think? I love it. I hope you love it too.
Maybe it's easy to start with first impressions. Does anyone want to share a first impression? Was there an image when you walked into the room that really grabbed your attention?
If you have a mic, like a handheld mic or something, because this is not going to get picked up too well. They're not talking.
For the individual.
see. Hold on.
And while that's going on, I mean, I know that it always is a bit. It's almost like if I were at an art gallery with someone else's work, there is that quiet, kind of awkward time where you're not really sure if you're wanting to ask questions or to talk about the work. I mean, I'll try to make it as open as possible. I don't have an idea that is solid, and my ideas are organic. I mean, through talking, and I mean, I'm taking this, I'm going back to the studio, excuse me, and this influences what I'm doing as an artist in my studio. So there is no right or wrong, and I mean, I almost sometimes have to feel like I step into the teacher mode to sort of get people to sort of say something. It's not that I'm wanting a specific thing to be said or anything. It's literally a conversation, and this conversation helps me, and I'm pretty sure it helps Olusola and Dave to sort of fill in the blanks, for lack of a better word.
Hi, Carlton Wilkinson. When I saw this particular piece, by first impression, really, you kind of spoiled that theory for me because you mentioned a velvet suit. But I thought of Barack Obama, quite frankly. And the stance and the tie, the red tie, but the target, then the fact you mentioned moving target, so that sort of applies. And no matter how he presents himself, I spent a lot of years and quite familiar with Missouri and in the St. Louis area. And I guess one of the stereotypes of St. Louis is that black men wear gold teeth. Okay, that's the and then you mentioned head in the clouds, so the presidency certainly would kind of communicate that idea. And he's just kind of standing back a little bit. And so, son of, I know he's been called quite a few son of certain things. So, again, that's what I relate to. I just see the presidential figure, Barack Obama figure, kind of in this cloud, and then being perceived in a certain way that it's not necessarily him,
Right.
but that's how some folks would like to see him.
Right,
as.
right. And that's that. I think that's honestly the beauty of it is that this piece, out of all the others, does ask for that. I mean, even with the title of not filling in something, it almost feels like, okay, if I automatically say that it's son of a beep, then that's not on me. Then that's what you said. I mean, that's what another person said. So he can be Barack Obama. If I take him out of here, he is. I mean, and I wanted to say,
Don't mention the velvet suit.
a different type. But I mean, I will say that Carlton is one of my best friends. I mean, just honestly, and I mean, having a conversation like this and knowing that there's questions that are asked from somebody that I know very well just lets me know that, I mean, something was done at least right in this piece, because there is that feeling that I want the person looking at it to make up their mind and either force this person to be a good guy that just happens to have this cloud and the gold teeth, or force him to be a bad guy because of everything that's around him, as opposed to what he actually, I mean, what he might be. I mean, so it's not really seeing the potential in who he is. It's sort of seeing that he has no potential because of whatever, all the situation that's around him.
Jamal had his hand.
Use the microphone, please.
I know you said it wasn't, I guess, a solid idea on some of these pieces, but I wanted to ask you, I guess, what were your thoughts maybe while you were creating this piece right here?
Okay, there's always in my, whenever I show works, there's always like a bridge piece that might be from a previous show. This happened to be from a previous show, but there were, when I was looking at everything as a whole, and I mean, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take the images. I'll take sometimes the pictures that I take are really crude because I just don't have the time and space and lighting to really get them, and I'll kind of put them together and get a sense of what everything looks like as a body of work as opposed to just the individual pieces. And since the idea of threes, well, twos and threes came up in this series of works a lot. And in the back, I know it's going to hurt people's necks and all that, but the idea of three was literally in this show, and the idea of that sweater and the hat that's in the piece back on the left was part of it. So I wanted to make some connections between that work and the works that are actually in here. But this piece also deals with the concept of family. Those two pieces deal with literal son, father, grandfather, and daughter, mother, grandmother. So I felt like I wanted to put that energy of who started this for me into the show. So this piece is actually a portrait of my grandfather. Just sort of saying, if we're looking at Meet the Fergusons, looking at this idea of Ferguson as a family name as opposed to a city, it's like, then who are these people then? So let me show you my grandfather. Let me show you my mother. Let me show you me. Let me show you the baby. Who's the baby? So it's almost like that idea. So my grandfather died when I was 7 years old, but he lived with my family up until he passed. And I have real fleeting memories of who he really was. I have pictures. I have the chair that he sat in that I actually painted in the back piece. All three of us are sitting on a chair that was passed down to me through my father to me. And the sweater is my grandfather's sweater. So my son, myself, my father actually put the sweater on. But it's something that it's strange. It's something I can pick up and smell, that sweater, and it's memories. But as I have grown older, the memories are in pictures. They're not so much as solid as they used to be. So I put my grandfather up on this real high pedestal as being somebody that influenced me and influenced my father and influenced my whole family when he was living with us. So he's turned into a Jesus, Martin Luther King, Barack Obama to me. The beauty that I see in those figures has kind of become this love that I had for my grandfather. And it was sort of a thing that I've been asked a couple of times, why you paint white Jesus? And it's sort of like, I've literally been asked that. And it was sort of like, okay, I wanted to put that old image of the Jesus figure, and I'm going to do a very strong disservice because I can't remember the artist that painted that.
Warner Salmon.
Hey, I got some new information. Warner
Salmon.
Okay. So the
Warner.
I'm about to say Warner Salmon piece that my grandfather and my grandmother had in their house was the image that I wanted to put in here, because at a certain point in time, Martin Luther King, it was almost like it was Jesus, and then when Martin Luther King came around, that picture was added to the list, and then when Barack Obama came around, that picture was now added to the list as well. So it's almost like, these figures that we've put up in front of us to be who we strive to be like, that was who I was as a 7-year-old, and I strived.
Yes.
Made a new word again, strived to be like my grandfather.
Striving.
There you go. I was striving to be like, that's my, thank you, Luz, appreciate it. All right. I was striving to be like my grandfather. And so what does my grandfather look like now? He looks like those people to me as an adult. So that's what that piece was about, and it's almost like this idea of those three graces that he's become for me. And I have wiped away everything else except for, if you can kind of see the clouds in the backdrop, it's almost like they're really faint, but right at the top of their heads, there's almost like these thought bubbles or clouds that have become like a pattern that have kind of melded together to become one song. So it's almost like they're singing, almost like not a barbershop quartet, but almost like a
little trio.
triplet of a song or a voice that I still hear. And the reason I didn't paint those thought bubbles or those clouds as solid, because those memories are fading. And so I'm wanting to see some people that look like the idea of my grandfather, even though that his voice is fading. I don't know what I don't even know what he sounds like. I don't know what he smells like when I used to. Yeah, so that's what that piece is about. And it linked to the idea of family in the back pieces. In the back two works, linked to that idea of that triplet, or that idea of threes, the past, the present, and the future, that kind of connected that to this series of works that forces people to see those people in Ferguson, Missouri, as being real people. If you look at me and you look at me as a real person, then you have to look at everybody that looks like me as a real person as well.
What's super interesting about this piece in relation to the other ones about the duality of the target and the halo is that all three of these figures really both had the target and a halo, right?
Man.
And
Wow.
well, you can argue with all three that, they've all sort of had to become whitewashed in order to even become these messianic figures, right?
Man.
I wanted to talk about other things, but was getting late. I do want to encourage more conversation over food and wine. Over food and wine. So we're going to turn the music on, and please talk with us and talk with one another, walk around the gallery. I want to thank Dave Perkins, the Religion, the Arts, Contemporary Culture here at Vanderbilt Divinity School, for always being gracious and giving and amazing, and Sam Dunson, who is just brilliant and just awesome, and also Metro Arts, who is one of the sponsors of tonight. Rebecca Barrios is here with us, the Director of Community Engagement at the Metro National Arts Commission. I'm Olusola Tribble, the Community Arts Coordinator, and we thank you here tonight. So, thanks.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.